The transport ship moved through the darkness of space like a giant metal beast. Inside, 20 beings sat in silence. Each one came from a different world, a different species. Some had scales, some had fur, some glowed with soft light. One had skin like crystal that reflected the dim lights of the ship. They were all here for the same reason. They wanted to prove their people deserved a place in the Galactic Council. In the back corner, a human sat alone. His name was Han Taiyang. He was 32 years old and came from a place called Korea on Earth. Unlike the others who wore armor made of advanced metals or had technology embedded in their bodies, Taiyang wore a simple thermal suit. It was the kind any human could buy. Next to him sat a small backpack with basic supplies and a worn notebook filled with drawings and notes. The alien next to him made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a Vrexian named Koth. His body looked like it was carved from blue ice. Sharp edges and smooth surfaces made him look dangerous and beautiful at the same time. Koth pointed at Taiyang's notebook with one crystalline finger. "You bring paper to a survival test?" Koth's voice sounded like wind blowing through a cave. "How primitive. My people survived ice ages that lasted 10,000 of your years. We need no tools. Our bodies are the tools." Taiyang smiled but said nothing. He had learned long ago that words meant little. Actions showed truth. He opened his notebook and continued reading the notes his grandfather had written years ago. Simple drawings showed how to build shelters from snow, how to find the warmest place when everything was cold, how to make the wind your friend instead of your enemy. Across from them sat Vess, a Kilnari technician. Her body was covered in smooth brown chitin like an insect. Tiny lights blinked under her shell where nanoheaters kept her warm. The technology was worth more than most houses on Earth. She clicked her mandibles together in what her species called a smile. "At least the Vrexian has natural advantages," Vess said. "But the human? No thick skin, no fur, no built-in heating. Your people only left your planet a few generations ago. You barely have space travel. Why did Earth send you?" Taiyang looked up from his notebook. His dark eyes were calm. "My grandfather taught me something important. He said the strongest tree is not the one that never bends. It is the one that bends in the storm, but does not break. Humans are good at bending." The other aliens made sounds of amusement. Some shook their heads. Others ignored him completely. To them, this human was already defeated. He would be the first to call for rescue. Perhaps he would not even survive the first night. A voice echoed through the ship. It belonged to the test administrator, a being made of pure energy that called itself Nexus. "Attention, contestants. We are approaching Cryos 9. This moon has been chosen for the frozen hell test for 300 years. The temperature on the surface is currently minus 187 degrees. The wind speed is 240 kilometers per hour. You will each be given a shelter pod with basic heating, 1 week of food, and an emergency beacon. If you activate the beacon, you will be rescued immediately. But you will also fail the test." Nexus continued. "The test lasts 10 days. The species whose representative survives the longest wins. Only one species has ever completed the full 10 days. That was 80 years ago. Most fail within the first 3 days. Some die before rescue can arrive. This test is dangerous. You may refuse now without shame." No one refused. Pride ran deep in all the species present. Each believed they would be the one to succeed. Through the windows, Cryos 9 came into view. It was a ball of white and gray. Ice covered everything. No oceans, no forests, no life. Just frozen death waiting on the surface. The atmosphere was thin. The sun that warmed this moon was far away and weak. Everything about this place wanted to kill any living thing that landed on it. Taiyang watched the moon grow larger. He thought about his childhood in the mountains. His grandfather had taken him camping in winter when he was just 7 years old. The old man taught him to respect the cold, not to fear it, but to understand it. Cold was not evil. Cold was just cold. If you understood it, you could survive it. "Preparing drop pods," Nexus announced. "Each contestant will be placed in a separate zone. You will be 100 kilometers from your nearest neighbor. There will be no communication except for the emergency beacon. When you land, your test begins immediately. The contestants moved to their assigned pods. Each pod was a small metal sphere with a door. Inside was a simple space with basic supplies. The heating unit was standard across all pods. No one had an advantage in equipment. The test was fair in that way. As Tai Yang climbed into his pod, he saw Zila, a Theron ambassador. She was covered in thick white fur that looked soft and warm. Her species came from a frozen planet. She had evolved for cold. As she passed Tai Yang, she made a sound like a gentle growl. Human, I respect your courage. But courage is not enough here. This test requires adaptation that takes millions of years of evolution. Your species is too young, too soft. You will fail by day 2. I am sorry for this. Taeyang bowed slightly, a gesture of respect from his culture. Thank you for your concern. Perhaps you are right, or perhaps evolution is not the only way to adapt. Sela looked confused but said nothing more. She entered her pod. Taeyang secured himself in his pod. He placed his backpack carefully beside him. The notebook went into a waterproof case. He checked his supplies one last time. Food bars, water recycler, multi-tool, thermal suit. Everything was basic but functional. He also had something none of the others brought. A small metal container with chemical heat packs and some cloth. Simple things. Old technology, but proven over thousands of years of human survival. Drop sequence beginning, Nexus said. 10, 9, 8. Taeyang closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He remembered his grandfather's last words before the old man died. Taeyang, the world will always try to test you. Cold, heat, hunger, fear. But remember this. Humans survived the Ice Age with nothing but fire and sharp rocks. We crossed frozen lands. We climbed the highest mountains. We are still here because we learn. We adapt. We share knowledge. Never forget that you carry 40,000 years of survival wisdom in your mind. 3, 2, 1, drop. The pod fell from the ship like a stone. The force pushed Taeyang back into his seat. Through the small window, he saw the white surface of Krios 9 rushing toward him. The pod shook violently. Heat shields activated as they entered the thin atmosphere. Then, with a tremendous crash, the pod hit the ice. Everything went still. Taeyang waited a moment, then unbuckled himself. He looked at the temperature gauge. Minus 192 degrees outside. The pod's heater was already working, keeping the inside at a barely comfortable 5 degrees. He had 72 hours of heating at this rate, maybe 96 if he was careful. The other contestants were probably already turning their heaters to maximum. They would be warm and comfortable, for a while. Taeyang made a different choice. He turned his heater down to minimum. The temperature inside his pod dropped to minus 5 degrees. Cold, but not dangerous. Not yet. He put on extra layers from his pack. He wrapped the cloth around his hands and feet for extra insulation. Then he opened his grandfather's notebook and began to read. Not because he did not know what to do. He knew. He read because the words connected him to every human who had ever survived impossible cold. Every person who built a fire in a blizzard. Every family that lasted through a harsh winter. They were all with him now in the knowledge they passed down. Outside, the wind howled. Ice particles scratched against the pod like tiny claws. Somewhere out there, 19 other beings were confident in their victory. They had evolution. They had technology. They had pride. Taeyang had something different. He had the accumulated wisdom of a species that learned to survive everywhere with almost nothing. And now, on this frozen hell of a moon, that wisdom would be tested against the galaxy's best. The test had begun. The first night on Krios 9 was brutal. Taeyang sat in his pod, breathing slowly to conserve warmth. His breath turned to fog in the cold air. The heater hummed quietly at minimum power. Outside, the ice storm raged. Wind speeds reached 270 kilometers per hour. The sound was like 1,000 voices screaming. Far away in orbit, the Galactic Council observers watched their monitors. 20 dots showed the locations of 20 contestants. All life signs were stable. But the council members noticed something strange. 19 pods showed high energy consumption. Their heaters ran at maximum capacity. One pod showed minimal energy use. "The human's pod, is the human's heater broken?" asked Council Member Thresh, an elderly Vrexian. His crystalline body glowed with concern. "No," replied the monitoring officer. "He deliberately set it to minimum. His internal temperature is stable. He appears to be managing cold through insulation and controlled movement." "Foolish," Thresh said. "He will use his limited power and still freeze. Humans have no natural cold resistance." But Taeyang was not being foolish. He knew something the others had forgotten. Heat was precious. If he burned through his power in 3 days staying comfortable, he would have nothing left for the remaining 7 days. Better to be cold now while he still had backup power than to be freezing later with none. When dawn came, the storm lessened. Not much, but enough. Taeyang had been waiting for this moment. He put on every piece of warm clothing he had. He wrapped his face with cloth, leaving only his eyes exposed. Then he opened the pod door. The cold hit him like a physical blow. Even with his thermal suit and layers, the minus 180-degree air tried to steal his warmth instantly. But Taeyang had felt cold before. Not this extreme, but he understood the principle. Cold was just the absence of heat. He needed to keep his heat inside his body and create barriers between himself and the cold air. He looked around. Ice stretched in every direction. The ground was hard and blue-white. Strange formations of frozen minerals stuck up like teeth. But Taeyang saw something else. He saw building materials. Using his multi-tool, he began cutting blocks from the ice. Each block was roughly the size of a thick book. He worked quickly but carefully. His grandfather had taught him that rushed work in extreme conditions led to mistakes. Mistakes led to death. 20 minutes outside. Then back inside to warm up. 20 minutes rest. Then back outside. Slow and steady. By the end of the second day, he had cut over 100 ice blocks. They sat in neat piles around his pod. The other contestants would think he was insane if they could see him. They were inside their pods, warm and comfortable, rationing their food and waiting for the test to end. On the third day, Taeyang began building. He placed the ice blocks in a circle around his pod. Each block fit against the next at a slight angle. The circle curved inward as it rose. He was building a dome. Not just any dome, an igloo. The same kind of structure his ancestors created thousands of years ago, when they needed shelter in the Arctic regions of Earth. The council observers increased their attention on the human's location. What was he doing? No other species had ever tried to build additional shelter. They all relied on the provided pods he builds with ice, Thresh said, his voice full of disbelief. He uses the cold itself as protection? Clever, said another council member, a luminari being named Sora. She floated in the air, her light pulsing with interest. Ice is an excellent insulator when properly structured. The air trapped between ice crystals prevents heat transfer, and ice is everywhere on that moon. Free building material. While Taeyang built, the other contestants began to struggle. Vess the Quilnari with her expensive nano heaters discovered a problem. Her technology was perfect for normal cold. But this was not normal cold. This was extreme. Her heaters consumed more power than expected. By day 3, she had used half her pod's energy. Panic set in. She reduced her heater to minimum, but the cold immediately affected her. Her species came from a warm world. They had never evolved for this Koth. The confident Vrexian was doing better. His crystalline body truly was adapted to cold, but even he felt the drain. Minus 200 degrees was extreme even for his species. He stayed in hibernation mode most of the time, barely conscious, letting his body's natural resistance handle the temperature. He did not build anything. He did not prepare. He simply endured. By day 4, Taeyang's igloo was complete. The dome rose 3 meters high around his pod. He had built an entrance tunnel that sloped upward. This was crucial. Warm air rises. Cold air sinks. The upward tunnel would trap warm air inside while letting cold air drain out. He also made the entrance small, just big enough to crawl through. Less opening meant less heat loss. He crawled inside his new shelter. The difference was immediate. Outside the igloo, wind screamed at 200 kilometers per hour. Inside, the air was nearly still. The ice walls blocked the wind completely. The temperature inside the igloo was minus 20 degrees. Still cold, but 60 degrees warmer than outside. And with his pod's minimal heater running, the space where he sat reached a survivable minus 5 degrees. Taeyang allowed himself a small smile. He had power for weeks now. His food would last. He was as comfortable as anyone could be on this frozen moon. On day 4, the first contestant failed. It was a Zoltan, a species that breathed methane. Despite its thick hide, its heating system malfunctioned. The methane in its breathing apparatus began to freeze. It had no choice. It activated the emergency beacon. Rescue came within an hour, 1 down. 19 remained. 3 hours later, another beacon activated. A reptilian species called the Scar. They were cold-blooded. Their contestant had believed their advanced heating suit would compensate. But cold-blooded creatures need external heat to function. When the suit's power began to fail, the Scar's body temperature dropped. Its movement slowed. It made the smart choice and called for rescue before it froze to death. Then Vess's beacon activated. The Kilnari had tried to endure, but her species simply was not built for this. Even with nanoheaters, even with careful power management, the extreme cold was too much. She had to admit defeat, 3 down in 1 day. The council observers took note. This was unusual. Normally, contestants failed gradually over many days, but something about this particular test was harder. The temperature on Krios 9 was 5 degrees colder than usual. A small difference in numbers, a huge difference in survival. By day 5, 6 more contestants had activated their beacons. Some ran out of power. Others realized their biology could not handle the sustained extreme cold. Better to fail than to die. The test was harsh but not meant to kill unnecessarily. The beacons existed for good reason. Inside his ice fortress, Taeyang ate a meal bar and drank water he had melted using a chemical heat pack. He wrote in his notebook, recording observations. The ice on Krios 9 was harder than Earth ice. It cut cleanly and stacked well. The dome shape was perfect for distributing wind force. No single point took too much pressure. He also noted what was working and what could improve. If he had to do this again, he would make the entrance tunnel longer. He would add a second layer of ice blocks with an air gap between for extra insulation. He was not just surviving, he was learning. In orbit, Ambassador Park Mira watched the monitors with quiet satisfaction. She represented Earth at the Galactic Council. When the Council announced the frozen hell test, many members questioned why Earth would even try. Humanity was new to space. They had no biological advantages. Their technology was primitive compared to elder species. But Park Mira knew something the Council did not understand. Humans had survived impossible conditions for thousands of years, not because they were strong or fast or had special abilities, but because they learned. They adapted. They took knowledge from one generation and passed it to the next. Each generation added to that knowledge. By the time Taeyang was born, humanity had 40,000 years of survival wisdom waiting to be learned. Ambassador Park, Thresh said, approaching her. Your contestant is performing unexpectedly well. We have never seen this building technique before. Did you provide him with special training? Park Mira shook her head. No special training. What he knows is common knowledge on Earth. Any human who studies survival techniques learns to build an igloo. We have books about it, videos, classes. It is basic human education for cold weather survival. Thresh looked shocked. Common knowledge? You mean any human could do this? Any human with proper training, yes. We have been building ice shelters for over 30,000 years, long before we had metal or advanced materials. We learned because we had to, and we never forgot. By day 6, 11 contestants remained. The failures had been steady. Even strong species with natural advantages struggled against the relentless cold. Power reserves dwindled. Food was carefully rationed. Morale dropped as the reality of the test set in, but Taeyang was thriving. Not comfortable, never comfortable, but stable. His power reserves were barely touched. His food would last well beyond the 10 days. And he had proven something important. Ancient human knowledge could match or exceed advanced alien technology. The observers in orbit watched with growing interest. Many had dismissed the human at the start. Now they saw him as a serious contender. Some even began to fear what it meant if he succeeded. Because if a human with basic equipment and ancient knowledge could survive frozen hell, what else could humans do? On the morning of day 6, the orbital sensors detected something that made every council member stop their other work. A massive storm system was forming in the northern hemisphere of Krios 9. The computers calculated its path and strength. The results were terrifying. This is unprecedented, said the chief meteorologist, a floating gas being called Whisper. Wind speeds will exceed 500 kilometers per hour. Temperature will drop to minus 230 degrees. The storm will pass directly over the test zone. The council chamber erupted in urgent conversation. Thresh, the elder Vrexian, demanded immediate action. We must abort the test. Extract all contestants now. This storm will kill them, but others disagreed. The test had rules. Intervention was only allowed in case of equipment failure or medical emergency. A natural weather event, no matter how extreme, was part of the challenge. After heated debate, they reached a compromise. They would warn the contestants but leave the choice to them. Each being could request emergency extraction or choose to stay and face the storm. The warning went out to all 11 remaining contestants. A voice message in each one's native language. The storm was coming. It would arrive in 6 hours. This was beyond anything the test had seen before. Extraction was available without penalty. This was survival, not suicide. 7 contestants immediately activated their beacons. They were not cowards. They were smart. The storm was too dangerous. No shame existed in choosing life over pride. 4 chose to stay. Koth, the Vrexian warrior, decided his hibernation state would protect him. Zila, the Theron ambassador covered in thick fur, believed her biology could handle it. 2 others, a silicon-based wreck and a methane being called Drax, thought their unique physiologies gave them a chance. And Taeyang, the human who had been underestimated from the start. Inside his ice fortress, Taeyang listened to the warning message. He looked at the emergency beacon. 1 press and a ship would come for him. He would be safe, warm, and alive. He would also have failed. He thought about his grandfather. The old man once told him a story. During a terrible blizzard in the mountains, they were trapped in a small shelter. The wind tried to tear it apart. Snow buried them completely. They had no radio, no way to call for help. His grandfather stayed calm. He told young Taeyang that nature was not trying to kill them personally. The storm was just a storm. It was their job to be smarter than the wind. They survived that storm by working with what they had. Reinforcing weak points, using snow as insulation instead of fighting it, staying calm instead of panicking. When the storm passed, they were cold and hungry but alive. The mountain had tested them and they passed. Taeyang put the beacon away. He would not use it. Instead, he went outside to prepare. For the next 5 hours, he worked without stopping. He built a second wall around his igloo. This outer wall was rougher and thicker. Between the 2 walls, he left a gap of 1 meter. Air trapped in that gap would act as insulation. He also built windbreaks from ice blocks. These angled structures would deflect the worst of the wind around his shelter, instead of letting it hit directly. He reinforced the entrance tunnel, made it longer, added curves to it so wind could not blow straight through. He covered weak points with extra ice. He used frozen mineral deposits to anchor some blocks. Every action had a purpose. Every modification made the shelter stronger. When he finished, his double-walled fortress looked like a small mountain of ice. The council observers could barely see the original pod inside. "What is he doing?" asked Thresh. "He should be preparing to evacuate." Instead, he builds more? Ambassador Park Mira watched the screen with pride. He is doing what humans have always done. He is adapting. That storm sees him as prey. He will show it otherwise. The storm arrived exactly when predicted. The sky darkened. Wind speeds climbed from 200 to 300 to 400 kilometers per hour. The temperature plunged. Minus 210, minus 220, minus 231 degrees. The standard shelter pods began to fail almost immediately. These pods were designed for harsh conditions but not impossible conditions. Stress fractures appeared in the metal. Warning alarms sounded. Koth remained in his pod in deep hibernation. His crystalline body could survive extreme cold, but he needed the pod's protection from the wind. The structure groaned under the assault. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, one wall shattered, the wind rushed in. Even in hibernation, even with his adapted biology, Koth could not survive direct exposure to 500-kilometer winds at minus 230 degrees. His body began to freeze in ways it never had before. Deep cold penetrated his crystalline structure. He woke from hibernation in panic and activated his emergency beacon. But rescue ships could not fly in these winds. They would try, but it would take time. Koth curled into a ball, using every bit of his species' cold resistance to stay alive until help arrived. He would survive, but barely. Sela faced a different problem. Her pod remained intact, but the life support system was failing. The storm somehow disrupted the oxygen recycler. The air inside became thin. The Theron ambassador could handle cold, but she still needed to breathe. Her thick fur and layers of fat did nothing for oxygen deprivation. With regret, she activated her beacon. The Rex pod lost power completely. Its silicon-based body did not need as much heat, but it still needed some. The cold grew too extreme. It called for rescue. Drax, the methane breather, discovered that its unique biology was not an advantage here. The extreme cold froze methane solid. Its breathing apparatus clogged. Its body began shutting down. The beacon activated 4 beacons. 4 failures. Rescue ships launched, but had to fight the storm. It would be hours before they could safely retrieve the contestants. The council watched with concern. Everyone would survive, but it was close. Then they checked the 5th remaining contestant. The human Taeyang sat inside his double-walled ice fortress listening to the storm. It sounded distant, muffled, like it was happening far away instead of just outside. The wind could not reach him. The outer wall took the main impact. The wind deflectors redirected the force around the shelter. The inner wall, his original igloo, remained completely protected. The temperature inside dropped to -18 degrees. Cold, very cold, but survivable with proper clothing. Taeyang wore every layer he had. He did controlled exercises to maintain body heat, push-ups, squats, movement that generated warmth without making him sweat. Sweat would freeze and kill him. He melted ice for water using a chemical heat pack. He ate a ration bar slowly, letting his body extract every calorie. He checked his pod's power reserves. Still over 60% remaining. He could last weeks more if needed. Outside, the storm raged with a fury that would tear apart most structures humans had ever built. But this was not a structure built to impress. It was not designed to look strong. It was designed to work with nature instead of fighting it. The dome shape let wind flow over it. The ice walls flexed slightly under pressure but did not break. Ice was strong when properly used. Humans had known this for 30,000 years. Taeyang opened his grandfather's notebook. By the light of his small glow stick, he read the old man's words again. The mountain does not care if you are strong. The blizzard does not care if you are brave. They are not your enemies. They simply exist. Your job is to understand them, to work with them, to be smarter than the storm. He was being smarter than the storm. While others brought advanced technology and biological superiority, he brought knowledge, the simple, tested, proven knowledge of human survival, and it was working. The storm continued for 18 hours. When it finally passed, the sensors showed 4 beacons active and 4 contestants rescued. 1 shelter remained standing. 1 contestant remained in the test. Han Taeyang, the human who was supposed to fail first, was now the last one left. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence. This had never happened before. 1 contestant, 1 species, alone against frozen hell, and that contestant was human. He was being smarter than the storm. While others brought advanced technology and biological superiority, he brought knowledge, the simple, tested, proven knowledge of human survival, and it was working. The storm continued for 18 hours. When it finally passed, the sensors showed 4 beacons active and 4 contestants rescued. 1 shelter remained standing. 1 contestant remained in the test. Han Taeyang, the human who was supposed to fail first, was now the last one left. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence. This had never happened before. 1 contestant, 1 species, alone against frozen hell, and that contestant was human. The morning after the storm, Taeyang emerged from his ice fortress. The sun was weak and distant, but it still cast light across the frozen landscape. He stood outside, breathing the impossibly cold air, and looked at what the storm had done. His outer wall had some damage. A few blocks were missing. Some cracks had formed, but the structure stood. More importantly, the inner wall, his original igloo, was completely intact. His design had worked perfectly. The outer wall sacrificed itself to protect the inner sanctum. Taeyang spent 2 hours repairing the damage. He replaced broken blocks with new ones cut from nearby ice. He filled cracks with packed snow. When he finished, the fortress was stronger than before. He had learned from the storm. His next shelter would be even better. In orbit, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. The chamber was full. Every council member attended. Even those who normally sent representatives came in person. What they had witnessed changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. Thresh spoke first. His crystalline body seemed less bright than usual. I must admit what I did not believe possible. The human succeeded where my own species failed. Koth was our finest warrior. His body was literally made for cold, yet he nearly died while the human sat comfortably in a shelter made from ice. Other council members added their observations. The Quilnari representative spoke of how their nano-heaters, technology worth billions, had failed. The Theran representative, whose species evolved on frozen worlds for millions of years, admitted defeat. One by one, every species acknowledged what the data showed. Biological adaptation had failed. Advanced technology had failed. Simple human knowledge had succeeded. Sora, the luminary being, floated to the center of the chamber. Her light pulsed with excitement. I have studied Earth history. Let me show you something that explains this impossible achievement. Holographic displays filled the air. Images from Earth's past appeared. Ancient humans in animal skins. Stone tools, fire, simple shelters made from bones and hides. 200,000 years ago, Sora explained, humans were weak creatures. No claws, no thick fur, no poison, no armor. They could not run as fast as predators. They could not fight as well as larger animals. By all logic, they should have gone extinct. More images appeared. Humans crossing frozen landscapes, building fires in caves, wearing clothes made from animal furs. But they did not go extinct. Instead, they thrived. They spread across every climate on their planet. How not through evolution. Evolution takes millions of years. They did it through knowledge. One generation learned to make fire. The next generation improved it. Then they taught their children. Knowledge accumulated like layers of ice. Each generation added more. The displays showed Earth during its last ice age. Vast sheets of ice covered continents, temperatures that would kill most species, yet humans survived. 40,000 years ago, Earth entered a severe ice age. Temperatures dropped. Food became scarce. Many species died, but humans survived. Not because they evolved cold resistance in a few thousand years. That is impossible. They survived because they learned. They discovered that snow could insulate, that ice could be shaped into shelter, that certain techniques trapped heat. Ambassador Park Mira stood and addressed the council. What Lieutenant Taeyang did on Krios 9 is not special by human standards. It is basic. We teach this knowledge to our children. Every human who lives in cold climates knows these techniques. They are written in thousands of books, shown in countless videos, taught in survival classes. She paused, letting that sink in. Taeyang is not exceptional among humans. He is simply educated. Any human with proper training could have done what he did. That is what makes humanity dangerous. Not individual strength, not special biology, but the fact that we share knowledge freely and build upon it constantly. Thresh shook his head. But other species keep records. We have libraries. We share information. Why did this not help us? Park Mira smiled. Because your species evolved for cold. You never had to learn these techniques. Your biology did the work. When you faced cold beyond what your evolution prepared you for, you had no cultural knowledge to fall back on. You brought technology instead of understanding. She gestured to the display showing Taeyang's shelter. Humans could not rely on biology. We had to understand the principles. Why does a dome shape work better than a square? Not because we evolved to know that, but because our ancestors tested different shapes and found what worked. They passed that knowledge down, refined it, improved it over thousands of years. Another council member, a tentacled being called Maruk, spoke up. Are you saying humans are more adaptable than species with millions of years more evolution? In a way, yes, Park Mira replied. Your species are optimized for specific conditions. You evolved perfect solutions for your homeworlds, but humans evolved to be generalists. We can survive anywhere because we learn how to survive anywhere. We adapt not through biology but through innovation. The chamber fell silent. Every council member understood the implication. Humanity was not strong, not fast, not durable, but they were flexible in a way no other known species was. They could learn to thrive in any environment given time and resources. On Krios 9, Taeyang was unaware of the debate happening above him. He spent his time productively. He expanded his shelter, adding a second chamber for food storage. The natural cold preserved his rations perfectly. He built a simple ice reflector to catch and concentrate the weak sunlight, gaining a few degrees of passive warming. He exercised to maintain body heat and muscle tone. He meditated to keep his mind sharp. He wrote detailed notes in his grandfather's notebook, documenting everything he learned. The optimal angle for ice blocks. The best way to pack snow for insulation. How to identify which ice formations were strongest. This knowledge would return to Earth with him. Other humans would read it. They would learn from it. They would add their own discoveries. The accumulated wisdom would grow, ready for the next generation. On day 8, the Council received a request from multiple universities across the galaxy. They wanted to send researchers to study Taeyang's shelter. The structure had withstood conditions that destroyed purpose-built pods.
Engineers wanted to understand how.
Physicists wanted to analyze the thermal dynamics. Architects wanted to study the design principles. A human had built something with ice and basic tools that interested the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The irony was not lost on anyone. Thresh approached Park Mira privately. "Ambassador, I must ask. If we give humanity full council membership, what will they do? Your people are frighteningly adaptable. You survived your own ice age with stone tools. What will you do with access to galactic technology and resources?" Park Mira met his gaze calmly. "What we have always done. We will learn. We will adapt. We will take what you offer and combine it with our own knowledge. We will share it freely with others. We will push boundaries and find solutions to problems you did not know existed." She smiled. "You fear us because you do not understand us. We do not seek domination. We seek knowledge. We do not want to conquer. We want to explore. We want to learn from you just as much as we have to teach." Thresh was silent for a long moment. Then his crystalline body glowed brighter. "I believe you, and that is why I will vote for your membership. The galaxy needs species who solve problems through understanding rather than force, who build with the environment rather than against it, who share knowledge rather than hoard it." On day 9, Taeyang sat in his shelter, comfortable and warm by Krios 9 standards. He had enough food for another week. His power reserves could last a month. His shelter could potentially stand for years if needed. He thought about home, about his grandfather who taught him these skills, about the long line of humans who survived impossible conditions and passed their knowledge forward. He was not special. He was simply the recipient of 40,000 years of human persistence. Tomorrow was day 10. The test would end. He would return to Earth, and humanity would take its place among the stars, not through conquest, through knowledge. On the morning of day 10, extraction ships descended through Krios 9's thin atmosphere. The test was officially complete. Taeyang stood outside his ice fortress, watching the ship grow larger in the gray sky. Behind him, his shelter stood undamaged. Around him, the frozen wasteland stretched to the horizon. He had survived, more than survived. He had thrived. The ship landed 200 meters away. Its landing jets melted the ice beneath it, creating a pool of water that immediately began to refreeze. A ramp extended and a figure emerged. It was Nexus, the energy being who administered the test. Its form glowed with soft blue light against the white landscape. Taeyang picked up his backpack. He took one last look at his creation. His grandfather would have been proud, not because it was impressive, but because it was simple and effective. The old man always said the best solutions were the ones that worked with minimal resources. He walked toward the ship. His legs were strong. His mind was clear. He had actually gained weight during the test from careful food management. He was in better condition now than when he started. Nexus studied him with what might have been surprise. In 300 years of administering the frozen hell test, it had never seen a contestant finish looking healthy and refreshed. "Lieutenant Han Taeyang of Earth," Nexus said, "you have completed the test. You are the only contestant to finish this year. In fact, you are only the second being in the test's entire history to complete all 10 days comfortably. How do you feel?" Taeyang bowed respectfully. "I feel fine. Cold, but fine. Thank you for this opportunity." "I learned much. You learned?" Nexus sounded confused. "Most contestants speak of surviving or enduring. You speak of learning." "Yes, I learned that the ice here is harder than Earth ice. I learned that the mineral deposits can anchor structures. I learned that my shelter design could be improved. Next time I would make the entrance tunnel longer and add a third wall. I documented everything in my notes." He patted his backpack where his grandfather's notebook rested. "This knowledge will help other humans. That is how we survive. We learn and we share. The journey back to the orbital station took 2 hours. Taeyang spent the time looking out the window at Krios 9 shrinking below. That frozen hell had tested him. He had answered with ancient human wisdom, simple techniques refined over thousands of years, and he had won. When they docked at the station, a crowd waited. Council members, scientists, journalists from 100 worlds. They all wanted to see the human who beat frozen hell. Ambassador Park Mira pushed through the crowd and embraced him. "You did it. I knew you would, but you really did it. I just used what grandfather taught me," Taeyang said quietly. Anyone could have done the same. That statement rippled through the crowd. Several aliens looked at each other with concern. If any trained human could do this, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? The Galactic Council convened for the final vote that same day. Taeyang was not present. He was in medical being examined. The doctors found him in perfect health, better than perfect. He had lost no muscle mass. His cardiovascular system was strong. His mental state was stable. By every measure, the test had not harmed him at all. In the council chamber, the debate was intense. Some members argued humanity should be accepted immediately. Others urged caution. A few suggested humanity might be too dangerous to allow into the galactic community. Thresh stood to speak. His crystalline body caught the light. "I opposed humanity's membership before this test. I believed them too primitive, too weak, too young as a spacefaring species. I was wrong. The test proved what we all saw. Humanity possesses something more valuable than strength or technology. They possess adaptability through accumulated knowledge." He gestured to the displays showing Taeyang's shelter. "My people evolved for cold. We spent millions of years adapting. Yet when faced with extreme cold, we failed. Humanity had no such evolution. But they learned. They experimented. They passed knowledge through generations. In a way, their cultural evolution is faster than our biological evolution." Sora, the luminary being, added her support. "I have studied Earth. Humans survived an ice age with stone tools. They crossed frozen continents. They climbed the highest mountains. They explored the deepest oceans, always pushing, always adapting, always learning. The galaxy needs this perspective." But not everyone agreed. A council member from a militaristic species called the Dracon spoke up. "This is exactly why we should refuse them. They are too adaptable, too unpredictable. Give them access to our technology and they will use it in ways we cannot anticipate. They are dangerous." Park Mira stood. "With respect, every new species is dangerous in some way. The Vrexians are dangerous because they are strong. The Luminari are dangerous because they are wise. The Quilnari are dangerous because they are innovative. Humanity is dangerous because we adapt. But danger is not the same as evil. We seek knowledge, not conquest. We seek cooperation, not domination." She paused. "Judge us not by your fears, but by our actions." Lieutenant Taeyang could have sabotaged other contestants. He could have used his success to mock those who failed. Instead, he spoke of learning and sharing knowledge. That is who humans are. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Several species voted against, but the majority voted in favor. Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. However, the Council added a special notation to humanity's file. It read, "Species shows unprecedented adaptability through cultural knowledge transfer. Recommend careful integration. Monitor for rapid advancement. Most concerning trait, humans view any environment as potentially habitable with sufficient preparation and knowledge." Taeyang returned to Earth 3 weeks later. He arrived to a hero's welcome, though he did not feel like a hero. He had simply used techniques any human could learn. His grandfather's notebook was donated to the National Museum of Human Achievement. It sat in a display case next to other artifacts of human persistence. Stone tools from the Ice Age, navigation charts from ancient ocean voyages, the footprint from the first moon landing, media from across Earth wanted interviews. Taeyang gave a few, though he preferred to avoid attention. In each interview, he said the same thing. "I am not special. What I did is not special by human standards. Any person with proper training could have done the same. That is the point. We share knowledge freely. We build on what came before." This statement, meant to be humble, actually terrified some alien observers. If Taeyang was ordinary, what would an extraordinary human accomplish? As humanity integrated into the galactic community, something unexpected happened. Alien universities requested human survival instructors. The techniques that seemed primitive were now seen as sophisticated solutions to complex problems. The concept of an igloo, a structure built from the very material trying to kill you, became a required case study in adaptive engineering programs. Koth, the Vrexian warrior who had failed the test, requested a meeting with Taeyang. They met in a neutral space station. Koth bowed deeply, a gesture of respect his species rarely showed. "You defeated me without fighting," Koth said. "You survived where I failed. I came to understand why. My species has strength, but we forgot wisdom. We relied on what we were born with. You relied on what you learned. I request permission to study with human survival instructors. I wish to learn what my evolution did not teach me." Taeyang smiled. "Knowledge belongs to everyone. Come to Earth, learn with us. Teach us what you know in return." That is how all species grow stronger. Years passed. The frozen hell test was eventually discontinued. Not because humanity ruined it, but because Taeyang's success exposed a fundamental flaw in the test's design. It measured biological superiority and technological advancement, but it failed to account for adaptability through accumulated wisdom. A new test was designed, one that measured not just survival but the ability to learn, adapt, and share knowledge. Humans did well in this test too, but so did other species who embraced the principle of cultural evolution. In private councils, elder species who had looked down on humanity admitted an uncomfortable truth. If you gave an advanced alien all the technology in the galaxy and dropped them on an ice moon, they might freeze. But give a human a knife, some basic tools, and time to think, and they would not only survive, they would be comfortable while doing it. Then they would write down exactly how they did it so the next human could do it better. That was the human advantage. Not strength, not speed, not special abilities, but the simple, powerful truth that knowledge accumulated and shared across generations made any human potentially capable of surviving anywhere. Taeyang lived a quiet life after his fame faded. He taught survival courses. He wrote books about cold weather techniques. He never forgot his grandfather's lessons. And when he was old, he took his own grandchildren camping in the mountains in winter. He taught them to respect the cold, to understand it, to work with it instead of fighting it. Remember, he told them, humans survived the Ice Age with nothing but fire and sharp rocks. We are still here because we learn, we adapt, we share. Never forget that you carry 40,000 years of survival wisdom. Use it well. The children listened. They learned, and one day, they would teach their own children. The cycle of knowledge continued as it always had for humanity. On a frozen moon called Krios 9, a structure of ice still stood. The Galactic Council preserved it as a monument, not to human strength or technology, but to human wisdom, a reminder that the most powerful tools were not always the most advanced. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best.